Welcome to the 22nd Annual Tellabration Concert, sponsored by the Inland Valley Storytellers. My name is John St. Clair, and I'm the leader of this group. And before we start the stories, there's a couple things I need to talk about. One is, please either put your cell phone on airplane mode or turn it off or mute it. We don't want the stories to be interrupted by someone getting calls. It's kind of annoying. Secondly, at the conclusion of the program, there will be refreshments served outside on the sidewalk. And you are not allowed to bring the refreshments back into the building. You must eat the refreshments out on the sidewalk. It's free. I do have a little donation can if you want to contribute, but the refreshments are free and part of the program, and just don't bring them inside. And so now what I'm going to do is give a little bit of background about Tellabration. Every year, the Saturday before Thanksgiving, storytelling groups from around the world gather together to celebrate storytelling. And in 1988, J.G. Pinkerton, who was a storyteller in the state of Connecticut, came up with this idea to start doing this. And that first year, there were 6 different storytelling groups in Connecticut that did a Tellabration. The next year, several other states started doing it, and now it's kind of worldwide. And there are at least probably 200 storytelling events, Tellabration events going on, if not tonight, sometime during the week. This group, the Inland Valley Storytellers, did a joint Tellabration on Thursday night on Zoom with a group from Contra Costa County in Northern California, and we told stories. And we've been doing that since 2020 because when COVID hit, the live events stopped. And so we started doing Zoom. And we also started, and so we've continued it. And the Storytelling Association of California sponsors these joint Tellabrations with a group from Northern California, pairing with a group in Southern California, and we do it on Zoom. And this was the 5th year that this group has done it with 5 different storytelling groups in Northern California, and it's a lot of fun. So when we started meeting in person live, we decided to continue the Zoom for our monthly story swaps. We meet once a month, and we are now meeting in the historic Garner House, not the house itself, but the carriage house behind it, which is an art exhibit and conference room. And it starts at 7 o'clock. It's free and open to the public. You can come and listen to those of us who need to practice our stories. And if you want to try your hand at telling a story, you're welcome to do that as well. So one thing that's really, really important, and that is that you have a program, because on the back of the program, near the bottom, it has the website address for the Inland Valley Storytellers. So don't throw this away. When you go home, put this in a cherished spot. So next to your computer probably is a good spot. And visit our website, and then you can stay up to date with things having to do with storytelling. And you'll be alerted. In the spring, we'll be doing a spring concert, much like this. It won't be here. It'll be at, most likely at the Friends Meeting House on Harrison. We usually do the spring concert there. And then there also are other storytelling events. For instance, all the storytelling groups in Southern California gather once a year at the Southern California Story Swap Festival. And that, this year, is going to be held in Vista in San Diego County. And that is a free event. You just have to spend the gas to get down there.
And we carpool.
Yeah, we can carpool, right. And that's a wonderful event. And you'll see some people from our group and lots of wonderful stories in the San Diego group as well. So I'm going to read to you, and you can follow along on the front page of your program, the Tellabration Proclamation. In the name of storytelling, Saturday, November 23rd, I put the wrong date there, 2024, is hereby proclaimed to be Tellabration, the worldwide event of storytelling on this very day from San Diego to Sacramento, St. Louis to Long Beach, Utah to Connecticut, Fullerton to Claremont. Over 100 audiences are gathered for this spectacular storytelling event. Without further delay and enjoy and anticipation, let the stories begin. Our first storyteller is Ron Evans. Ron is a retired minister, and he retired to Pilgrim Place in 2007 after serving as a senior member of the United Church of Christ congregation and teaching in a college. He and his wife Janet were present in 1988 at one of those very first Tellabrations in Connecticut, because that's where they lived in 1988. So they have quite a distinction there. Ron has been performing in Inland Valley Storyteller concerts since 2009. Welcome, Ron Evans.
One of the delightful things about being a part of this storytelling wonder is the fact that John, again and again and again, brings us together, inspires us in a variety of ways, and encourages us, whether our stories are good or could be much improved. And he's always a great help in that regard. Allow me to share a story with some information about the sad fact that the library was central. Central not only to the lives of those who used it, but especially central to the profession of one of them in particular. I refer, of course, to Dr. King, who had a little house where his village, a fishing village on the coast of China, was the central place where so many people in that community came not only to be in his presence, because they presumed and assumed and assessed quite rightly that just to be near him was itself inspiriting and a lift. He was the village's only physician and cared for most everyone and cared with them with a particular care, to be sure. Now, that library that I refer to was not in any way an institution or a building. In fact, it was only about a small wooden bookshelf with 3 levels of bookstand, and in it, books in English, in French, one in Latin, I think, and several bilingual dictionaries, and of course most of the other things, including the translation of several of Dickens' works in Mandarin, the language of the area. So that little library was central not only to the doctor because he found much of his resource there, but also much enjoyment in just reading and rereading, as many of us do again and again. But there wasn't very much enjoyment in that particular time, the time to which we're going to focus. You see, it was as divided or even worse than the times in the country that we know and love today. In fact, it was a most desperate time, and as a result, the entire Chang family had been preparing for the very worst. That means, could they survive, and might they even have to, and would this be possible, escape? Well, the day was a Tuesday, the 24th of May, 1949, And it was the day that a ruthless takeover of the entire country had begun. Oh, there were signs of it in days before, with activities of the military and the like, and many people prepared, but especially Dr. Chang and his family, for he knew that it would be something devastating for all. His family consisted of himself, his wife, 2 sons, his aged mother, and a daughter, Julia, 17. Julia was the center of the family in a very positive way. For some reason not entirely clear to her or to anyone else, she was designated as the person who would one day leave their village, leave that country, leave that part of the world, and come to study in America. It was their hope and their longing. But the day came when soldiers were everywhere and everything began to change. But there was one particular thing that happened in that auspicious time, a telegram, a long-awaited telegram finally arrived. Julia Chang, Timoyang, China. Smith College, pleased to welcome you to class of 1953, commencing September. Stop. Contact nearest office of U.S. Counsel, who will assist with all arrangements. Stop. Deborah Slate, Ph.D., Dean Admissions. It's what they were longing for. And just at the last minute, it arrived, and so hope was renewed. But at the same time, hope was renewed, the reality of the fact that she would have to disappear and at least try to escape also came to the fore. So early the next morning, her family gathered for a stoic, but no less tearful surrendering of that dear soul off to the fates. And in the care of her brothers, she was taken to the docks, there to meet Mr. Liu. Mr. Liu owned several fishing boats, and it was in his care that she would be taken away from China to go as far as Formosa, what we know as Taiwan, if possible. So the boys did take her to the docks, and as they went along, all of a sudden, they stopped, and a man stepped forward out of the shadows. Both of the boys bowed, and then they disappeared. The man approached young Julia and said, "Follow," and she did. And then in the shadows, he stopped again and said, "Do not be of fear. Your father once aided a member of my family. You are now in my care." And they started again to weave their way through the docklands to Mr. Liu's boat. As they did, they passed by several people who, though they seemed not to notice them going, would all of a sudden, with a slight bid ahead, this way or that, indicate that they should go this way and not that. And so eventually they found their way safely to Mr. Liu's boat. And there she was surrendered to him, and Captain Liu greeted her and said, "You will have to be housed in the hold of the ship, for there is no safety aboard. I have to be responsible for my ship and my crew." And then added, "But of course, your father was once of great aid to a member of my family. I will be careful of you." So down to the hold she went with her meager belongings and one very particular item, the dress that she was wearing, which was very simple, but had been made for her by her dear grandmother, who had so carefully sewn into the collar of her dress 5 crisp, new $10 US bills. And at the last moment before she left, undid all of those threads, folded, and then carefully also included the telegram from Smith College. So now here she is, never having been at sea before, a rocking Herodis journey, and they were boarded several times by sailors looking for anything that they could find, but they did not find Julia, and eventually she made her way. At the landing, she still had to remain in the hold of the ship, which is not very pleasant, but then arrangements were made for her safety, and then she was told that she would be taken aboard a Dutch freighter for America. How wonderful. And as she was transferred secretly at night to be all but a stowaway on this great freighter, she was greeted by a woman who was the wife of the captain and said, "Fear not, for your father was once of great aid to a person of our knowing. We will protect you." And though she was hidden all the way, though they went by Tokyo, finally they did land in America, albeit not the America that she had in mind. It was in Vancouver, British Columbia, a part of the Americas to be sure, but a long way from Northampton, Massachusetts. When they docked, soon a uniformed officer from the Canadian government appeared, along with a modestly dressed lady. The man looked at Julia from top to bottom and said, "We have one question. Are you the daughter of Dr. Qing Yan of Taiyuan, China, Doctor of Medicine, China?" Now, from her childhood, she learned enough English at the insistence of her family that she was able to follow what they were asking, and with her hesitant English, first of all, bowing gracefully, replied, "Yes, I am honorable to be so." The man turned on his heel, gave a handful of papers to the lady, and left. As soon as he left, the lady approached Julia and said, "I have been instructed by the Canadian Council in Shanghai to give to you something from your family. I have been asked to deliver it personally. May I do so now?" "Xie," Julia said in her Mandarin Chinese, "Thank you." And with that, the lady from the Vancouver YWCA stepped forward, a slight bow, put her arms out, and then enfolded Julia in the tightest of hugs and embracement. And naturally, though foreign to her, Julia had her arms circle around the lady as well, for a long and silent embrace. And at last, they pulled themselves apart, each one trying to keep from the other the fullness of the reality that there were much in the misting the eyes of each. And so a clearing of throats, and the lady from the YWCA said, "You will be in the care of the YWCA until further arrangements can be made." And so they were. And her summer was begun well, and she made many friends there, and her English improved, and her French as well, it being Canada, of course. And about midsummer, another letter arrived from Smith College, saying that all arrangements were made and completed, and that soon she would receive instructions on how to find her way to Northampton, Massachusetts, to become a member of the class of 1953. And she was, and she did, and proved in every way to be all that Smith College had hoped that she would become. A brilliant student, made wonderful friends, and excelled in every way. Graduated with honors, and went on to do graduate work at the University of Washington, Seattle, where she met a gentleman, Ling Chang-hu Ang, a ceramicist, whose name you may know because two of his works are in the care of the Scripps College collection of ceramics. They married and eventually had 3 children. Each of them came to be teachers, full professors, at Ohio University in Athens, Ohio. One of their three daughters went east to another school of some note, and there did exceedingly well, studying literature and architecture. In fact, so precocious was this child that she won several outstanding awards as an amateur before she was certified as an architect. In fact, she submitted a proposal, one of 1,462 proposals, all from professional architects from around the world for one of the most prestigious of commissions that could be afforded. And as an amateur, she won. She won a commission to build something that you all know about and many of you have seen. But of course, as her profession continued, time went on, and she excelled in a variety of ways and created several different kinds of buildings and regional appreciation of landscapes. And some of her work has been on exhibit here in Claremont, as well as in Los Angeles and in museums around the world. Certainly, though, the most important, or at least the most satisfying work that she'd ever been asked to redesign was a commission that was most personal to her, and that was to refurbish and design the great library at Smith College, where once her mother had studied, but alas, did not live to see the completion of that building. And when it was completed, maybe within the last year, you may have seen notice of it because there was a 2-page spread in the New York Times celebrating all of this. And of course, you made the notice right away that not only was that a great building, but that this young woman had a remarkable history. That in fact, in 1962, it was her submission that won the prestigious honor of providing for the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C. So, a great reputation and a great honor, and in every way a remarkable person. And you would think that that would be enough. But should you happen to, maybe you already have seen the Vietnam Memorial, but if you should happen to be in Northampton, Massachusetts sometime soon or other, be sure to visit that wonderful library as well. And just inside the entrance, on the right, I think, though not a part of the original design, do not lose sight of something that was added with the insistence of members of the class of 1953. It was a small wooden bookshelf with several volumes of Dickens, also in Mandarin, in French, and in English. And on the top shelf, you'll see a sign that says, Dr. Ying's Family Library, and the only surviving photo of Julia at 17 with the rest of her family. Alas, a work by Maya Ling. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. That was a wonderful story. Our next storyteller is Ron Chick, another Ron. Ron Chick is a retired teacher who told stories often as a teacher, his 30 years of classroom experience. And then when he retired, he could go anywhere he wanted to tell stories. And he actually is a member of many different storytelling groups because I believe Ron will tell a story anywhere where someone will let him tell a story. And he joined the Inland Valley Storytellers in 2010, and he has performed in every Inland Valley storytelling concert since the spring of 2010. Please welcome Ron Chick.
I am best known for folk tales and fairy tales. This story is told in folktale style somewhat. It is my own creation, and to get started with it, I need to talk about trolls. You see, classical trolls, creatures under bridges, monsters that dwell by Most people don't think there are any around anymore, but we can't be sure of that because some of them have the gift of shape-shifting, able to look like another being. The title of this story is The Dark of the Moon. Phineas was a troll. There are things that people know about trolls. For one thing, they're not very friendly. But their overriding characteristic is that they are greedy, selfish misers. Hey, it's a good thing that they don't trim their fingernails because they probably have a 150-year supply of trimmings. They let go of nothing without great thought. This particular troll, having survived into our century, was having a problem that is unique to this century. You see, while he had gold and treasures and jewels, his physical age in the community he was in couldn't be matched with his lack of old age. He had been there a long while. In an earlier century, he could easily have just gathered up his stuff, moved to another state, announced his name was whatever, and lived. But things are much more complicated now. In any case, he was growing quite desperate, looking for a chance to get out of his community with his treasures intact. It so happened in that town there was a young man named Daniel, whose physical parents had died in an accident when he was a small boy, and whose grandparents had raised him into early childhood, maybe 6th grade or so, when first his grandfather and then his grandmother passed away. And the community liked this young man and remembered the family, and different people took care of him in different ways until he reached high school, when the high school coach saw great potential in him as an athlete and brought him into his home, and he went through his high school years. But no one knew what or how life would continue for him once he had graduated from high school. Maybe with a scholarship, maybe not. In the spring of that year, a man came to town. He was a lawyer representing a will. He had been to see his richer uncle with his mother and father when he was young. He didn't remember him very well, but he remembered some of the things in that town, and particularly one kid who was just the best player anybody could be with, just a blast to be around. But he said, your uncle has died and you have inherited his estate. You must come present yourself to our offices in a distant state, on such and so a day, and we will begin the process. Well, he didn't have much money. The community probably could have raised a way for it to happen, but Phineas, not the name he used publicly, saw an opportunity. He went to him and said, you needn't take a bus or a train. I've got a new Cadillac, and I've got business things that I need to attend off in that direction. One place really fairly close to there. How about if I take you? We'll give different places, spend several nights on the road. We'll get to know each other better, and you'll get your life together. Well, of course, it was agreed. And Daniel had so much fun. He had never eaten in fancy restaurants. He had never spent a night in a resort. He was traveling along, and the troll kept moving in different directions, watching the calendar carefully, so that he would arrive near his destination on the night of the dark of the moon. And that afternoon, he drove up to a place he owned, he had acquired just for the purpose, a ramshackle old shack high in the mountains. But this is where we're going to be. It's too late to go on, but we'll spend the day here, tonight here, look at this place. I don't know whether it's worth anything, but yeah, we'll lay out on the floor here and we'll be okay. Well, Daniel was young and strong, and laying on the floor one night didn't bother him, and he thought everything was just hunky-dory, and he was thinking about Tomorrow I'll meet with the Lilies. I'll find out what is possible for me going forward. And he fell asleep with that thought. But it wasn't entirely long after that when suddenly his arm was encased in a cold grip. He looked over, and gripping his arm was a hand that seemed to be made of stone. The troll lifted him from the floor, held his arm, and began to drag him toward the door. He begged, he pleaded, he talked, and nothing stopped the troll. The troll took him outside, up the side of the hill, and put him down onto a big slab of granite. And somehow, a handcuff or a loop of stone formed out of his hand and around his arm and held him down fast. And then he secured his other arm. Then he took out a pair of scissors and cut all of his clothing off of him, pulled it aside. He had no idea what was going to happen next. The troll discarded his clothing, lay down on the stone, looked up into the dark, dark night sky, and began to absorb power from the stone and the earth that had given him birth long before. Daniel looked and watched as the whole body of his supposed mentor turned into stone, and then his face began to change. His neck began to change. It grew longer and longer and longer and longer and narrower, and then out of it came two strange tendrils. The last thing Daniel ever saw was those tendrils attaching themselves to his head. In the morning, there was no sign of a troll. Lying peacefully asleep on the stone, exhausted from the night's work, was an exact replica of young Daniel. Looked like him, sounded like him, had some of his memories and enough of his personality to carry himself into a new community. He went down into the community, introduced himself. Well, he had the right paperwork, he had the right ID, he had everything he needed. No one had any reason to doubt that this was Daniel. And so the troll settled into the town of Pleasantville. Pleasantville was an amazing place to live. Everybody seemed to have enough to get by. Some were richer than others. The four major churches in the area, each took one Sunday, the first Sunday of each month, or the first Saturday in the case of the Jewish community, and held an event for the whole community, and everybody came. People danced and sang and played games, they ate food, and they gathered that one day every month. Life was beautiful. People were kind. Racial problems didn't seem to be there. That's a terrible place for a troll to live. It was just too nice. He began to think, how can I gain any power here? I have wealth, but how can I gain any power here? You have to create enemies for people to become powerful, and there's nobody here to be, they're all too much, I don't know what to do. But at one of the festivals, a few weeks later, he noticed that there was one large extended family that was a little different. A lot of them had red hair. And some of those even had green eyes. And he thought, that's my chance. Suddenly, around the community, rumors began to spread about members of this family. That they had been there for 100 years didn't occur to anyone, but suddenly there were problems in schools and problems in the community and people looking at them strangely. Perhaps the troll's plan might have worked if it hadn't been for Douglas. Douglas was a bright young man who happened to be in love with the stars. He loved astronomy. He had telescopes, he had binoculars, and he often was out at night. And one night when he was out, it happened to be the dark of the moon, and he looked toward this man's house, lovely man and home that it was, and saw him come out and head out, not up the road, but across the fields, seemingly hopping over fences like they weren't there. Curious, Douglas followed, a ways back because he couldn't jump a fence. But he managed to follow and see this man, who he thought of as Daniel, climb up the glacial rock that was there, the only large piece of granite nearby. He saw him seemingly take off his clothes in the shadowy light of the stars and lay down on the rock. He had to talk himself into going forward, but he did. And he saw a creature slowly turning to stone. Well, of course, he got out of there, and he thought, I can't tell anybody about this. Nobody will believe such a thing. I'm seeing things. But now he was on the alert, and he could tell that there was something about Daniel that was a danger to his family and maybe a danger to his town. He didn't know what to do about it. He watched, but didn't see him again at night for about just a little short of a month. And then on the night of that dark of the moon again, he saw him again leave his home and head off into the night. Knowing where he was going, he rushed off to his uncle's house and said, this is what I saw. This is very strange. I don't know what to do about it, but I think it's happening again. His uncle looked at him and said, Douglas, you're an honest and wonderful kid. I don't know what you saw, but if we're going to go see it ourselves, maybe we should take your father and grandpa along with us. So the troops, so to speak, were gathered, and they set it off across the lands. Oh, they had to pull wires apart and find gates, but eventually they approached that granite rock. They climbed up, and they could see that strange, rocky, ugly shape on the rock. And they said, this can't be allowed to live in our community. And they took pieces of stone and began to bang on the troll's body parts, knocking its head aside, knocking its arms aside, separating its joints, and waiting for morning. And when the first light of day appeared, all that was left of the troll was perfect, smooth, beautiful sand. So if you can find the town of Pleasantville, you'll find in its square a fountain. And in that fountain there are fish. And the bottom of it is lined with the most beautiful, pure, white granite sand that has ever been. For they know that Daniel saved their town.
Thank you, Ron. Wonderful original story. It gets better every time I hear it.
Well, this is the fourth time I've told it in a week, so it's getting down to final form.
Yes, well, thank you for sharing it with us. It was wonderful. So our next storyteller is Glenn Grant. Glenn has been a professional speaker for over 30 years, having been hired by the city of Chino to speak to schools in the early 1990s. His genre of personal development speaking and storytelling is illuminated in his seminar, The Awakening. He joined the Inland Valley Storytellers in 2011 to bring the art and craft of storytelling to his audiences. Glenn started performing with Inland Valley Storytellers at the 2019 Spring Concert. Please welcome Glenn Grant.
Well, I'm delighted to be back here. Thank you, John, for having me. It's an honor to be in our story group. Am I speaking too loud? Because I sound really loud. Right? Am I blowing you guys out? At any rate, we have an eclectic group of storytellers, and they're all master storytellers, so it's an honor to be here. And I was born and raised in Claremont. This is my hometown. I left for many years, and so I'm delighted to be back. I went to school with Ellen's son from Folk Music Store, so this place holds special memories. I love being back at the Folk Music Store. And I'm going to tell a true story tonight. It's a love story. And my genre is, in our eclectic group of storytellers, I tend to be the existentialist amongst the group. But tonight, I'm not going to be so dark. It's a love story from my new book titled Golden Years. And this true story is the first essay in my book. And the name of this is When We Lay Our Soul to Sleep. And it reminds me of the journey that we're all on. One of 20th century's greatest American writers, Zora Neale Hurston, said of her time when she described the journey that men and women are on in our lives to create the life that we want. She said, ships at a distance sail on the horizon. And for some, they come in with the tide. While for many others, those hopes and those dreams will sail forever on the horizon and yet, sadly, never landing. It's not until the watcher turns his eyes away in deep resignation, his dreams mocked to death by time. That is the life of men. And I believe that's emblematic of all of our journeys. That resonated so deeply in me as a speaker when I heard that so many years ago. All of us set sail on a voyage to create the life we want. And this is the story tonight, the true story of Andreas. The year was 1940. And Andreas was born into a small, poor village town in his home country of Nicaragua. And his mother and father had such great hopes for Andreas. They wanted a better life for him. They wanted him to find a better opportunity. 1940s Nicaragua was a poor and impoverished place. But soon, as the years went by, he would come of age. The year was now 1958. And little Andreas would set sail on his own voyage to create his dreams. His mother and father loaded him up on that ship. And he set sail and landed on the shores of Los Angeles. And she welcomed him. That's what America does. That's what she does. She welcomes millions of people. You and I all know them, that come from faraway places to build a better life in America. Andreas was spit from the pit of possibilities, and he too wanted to build a better life. He would soon settle in Whittier, California. Andreas was a hardworking man. He got a manufacturing job, a man of faith, deeply devoted to his Catholic Church. And he was very involved in his community, actively engaged in civic volunteer work. 1958 was an interesting time in Whittier. A few years would go by. It was now the early 1960s, teeming with youth and ambition, Andreas would set sail on another voyage. This one would be to manifest and find and create that enduring love. Perhaps he was doing what most young men and women do when they're young. They set sail to find that enduring love. It was now early 1960s. He was out at a dance hall with his friends, and he found it. He found that love. And from that night forward, they were inseparable. They would then come back to Whittier, and I was able to have the honor of knowing Andreas and meeting him because him and his wife gave rise to 3 children of their own. They had a little girl, and they had 2 sons. It would be one of his sons, Andrew, that would become many years later one of my best friends. And our friendship has now endured for over 25 years. And over these years, he was the embodiment of love. And when I think of love, I think of that great 13th century mystic and poet, the Persian philosopher Rumi. Rumi says of love, love is like a tree. Its lovers are its shade. And Andreas embodied love in his family, his church, his faith, spirituality. And over the years, I got to see so many examples of it illuminated for me at birthday parties and family gatherings and weddings and backyard barbecues. Sometimes people teach us. We just watch. We don't have to necessarily be told. And he did that. And so I got to witness this amazing man, so committed to his love. And it would be a love that would endure for 55 years. So I got to see a lot of it until one day I got a phone call from Andrew. He said, "Glenn, my mother just passed away. But fear not, this is not a sad story, because we would gather back at the church in Whittier for a celebration of life. Not a sad event, a joyous celebration of life, to honor and celebrate this 55 years of love led by Andreas." And I remember coming up to him, again, as I intimated earlier, I am the existentialist. I made sure to look in his eyes, shake his hand deeply. I offered obviously my feeling of loss and my sorrow for his, and yet Andreas was at peace. He had built a wonderful family. His young girl had grown up to be a doctor. The other son got his degree in library science and became a librarian, just like my father and my grandmother. And my dear friend Andrew became a businessman, but more importantly, a devoted family man, wonderful father to little AJ, and a faithful and loving husband to Eva. And so his mom left behind a rich tapestry. As we closed out that joyous celebration of life that day, I shook his hand and said goodbye. A few months would travel by, and now Andrew would call me again. This time, he said, "You know, Glenn, my father's been missing for a couple of days. We haven't been able to find him. He was last seen and reported to be seen in Blythe, California. Blythe is a barren wasteland where time has forgotten. I should know. I've traveled my own voyage and journeys through Blythe probably over 30 times." He actually got in his car and left Whittier, left Los Angeles, and traveled 4 hours out into the California desert. To describe Blythe, I'd like to read a brief passage from my book. I say of it, at the base of the lower Colorado River Valley, just inland on the California side of the border. 150 miles west of Phoenix lies a treacherous and barren wasteland where time has forgotten. People of the tall pines once roamed this land. The Hualapai Indians made this 108-mile stretch of territory their home. It was steeped in a rich spiritual afterlife and a belief that the souls of the dead rise to the north and only to be seen by the spirits of the Indian tribe. But on this day, it would be a place of mystery and of many secrets. I offered to form a search party of my own. One had already been put together, and 10 days would go by until we finally found Andreas. And if you remember the title of this story, When We Lay Our Soul to Sleep, it was as if his family felt like he had done just that. We found him a couple miles north of the freeway from his car, and it was as if Andreas had decided to lay his soul to sleep. He was tired. But this is not a sad story because we all rejoiced. Keep in mind, Andreas was almost 90 years old. He had lived an amazing life. And so he did it on his terms. And I believe that there's something quintessential about that in a man's life when you choose to come to your end and you do it on your terms. And so we would gather again in Whittier at that same family Catholic church. And this was not a sad event. This was a homecoming. This was a celebration of life to honor the man that taught us what an enduring love looks like. And one of the most profound moments in my life so far, it was a watershed moment in my life, that quintessential moment when Andrew asked me if I would be Andreas's pallbearer. It's something I was deeply honored. There's something very humbling when you carry a man to his final space, his final resting, and you carry that person. I was deeply humbled by that and honored. I was asked by the family to speak a few words to all that had assembled at this celebration of life. And I thought very profoundly about that for several days. What came to my mind was my favorite Persian poet and mystic. Much like Hafez and others, but Rumi always seems to have the most eloquent words to illuminate the situation. He says, out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, Rumi whispers, there lies a field. He says, I will meet you there. When we lay our soul down in that grass, the world is too full to speak of. What Rumi is suggesting, all of us here that gather at Folk Music Store tonight, what he is suggesting is that we take this time of reflection to be in gratitude for our lives, our existence, the love. I have some wonderful, beautiful friends here in the audience tonight. That we rejoice in the love that we have. And I believe that's what Andreas would have wanted. And so, tonight is not a sad story. It's really a celebration of a man that taught us about the power of love. Much like Rumi says when he leaves us with love as a tree and its lovers are its shade. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Our next storyteller is Angela Lloyd. And Angela is a true professional storyteller. She's been a featured teller at 3 different national storytelling festivals. She received the Oracle Excellence Award in 2013 given by the National Storytelling Network, NSN, and she's very much involved in the NSN, and currently she is the chair of the Youth Educators and Storytellers Special Interest Group in NSN, and she's a unique storyteller. Please welcome Angela Lloyd.
This instrument is called an auto harp. This is a poem written by Emily Dickinson. My mama set it to music for a very high soprano voice. I found it one day in an elementary school music book in New Orleans. Sat down to read it on the piano in the assembly hall. We were between shows. And then I thought, no, I'm just going to sing it myself. So this is, will there really be a morning? Is there such a thing as day? Could I see it from the mountains if I were as tall as they? Has it feet like water lilies? Has it feathers like a bird? Is it brought from famous countries of which I've never heard? Oh, some scholar, oh, some sailor, oh, some wise man from the skies, please to tell a little pilgrim where the place called morning lies. Julie Harris was performing the Belle of Amherst on Broadway. My mama printed copies of her music, handwritten, and went to the theater and saw the Belle of Amherst. And she said to Julie Harris, I wrote 3 of her poems in music. And Julie Harris said, I'd love to hear them. And so a week later, when I came home from college, my mother sent me to the production of Belle of Amherst with the music rolled up and a blue ribbon to give to her. I like to write responses to poems. So here's the response. But first we sing it again. Will there really be a morning? Is there such a thing as day? Could I see it from the mountains if I were as tall as they? Has it feet like water lilies? Has it feathers like a bird? Is it brought from famous countries of which I've never heard? Oh, some scholar, oh, some sailor, oh, some wise man from the skies, please to tell a little pilgrim where the place called morning lies. Please to tell a little pilgrim where the place called morning lies. Oh, will there really be a morning? I've been waiting up all the night to see. I have read in my magazines there ain't nothing on the old TV. I slept in most of my life, I always worked the very night shift. Got home in the dark every day, never saw that sun shift. That sounds pretty good. Oh, some scholar, oh, some sailor, oh, some wise man from the skies, pleased to tell a very old man where the place called morning lies. Sold vacuum cleaners door to door. Did poetry readings at night at parties. Handwritten books left them from my granddaughter. There's this little girl lives down the hall. Her mama runs the place and she's fun at all. She likes the pancakes, I love the waffles. She plays spoons upon my knee. Oh, some scholar, oh, some wise man, oh, something in the sky. Please to tell the very old man where the place called morning lies. Oh, I can see it's coming now. They don't put the coffee on till the sun comes right up the hill. The Folk Music Center became my living room in 1987. I'd heard about it, but the first time I called and spoke to Dorothy Chase, it was because I really needed a diatonic D auto harp, a wildwood. The Oscar Schmidt I had was found at the dump. I love my Oscar Schmidt, but I needed a diatonic in D, and Dorothy answered the phone. I had a show coming up in Victorville at the Performing Arts Center, big thing, you know, and I needed it for that show. So they got it ready, tuned it up, and a fellow I'd met probably at an elementary education conference, he had a primary school here. He drove it up to Victorville and gave it to me at intermission of my solo evening. I took it out on stage and used it right away. But then I started coming here, and I found this here. This is an old Jewish fairy tale. There was once a village where everyone was miserable. They were so far from all the other places, and the merchants that came by, it wasn't very often. And lately when they came, the stuff they brought was stupid. Everybody had to work. They wished somebody could give them a little help. And the worst thing that had happened in that place, the children had become infected with their parents' discontent. The boys would lay out on the hot sidewalks in the summer and they'd say, "What are we going to do now, boys?" One day, there was a sound. And people out in the field with the potatoes, working in the blacksmith shop, holding a baby, they looked up and they watched this ragged peddler come in. He had a basket on his shoulder. This was very promising. His soles of his shoes were flapping open in the dust. His buttons, well, there weren't any. The buttonholes were looking for buttons. And he had a hat with his hair sticking out all the holes. And everybody stopped. Everybody gathered. And when he got close enough, someone said, "What have you got to sell?" And he said, "I sell happiness." And they said, "We don't want any." And someone said, "How much does it cost? What does it look like? What's in your basket?" And he snapped his fingers, and the basket leapt off his shoulder and spun and landed upside down in the dirt. He snapped his fingers, it flipped over, and everybody looked in. It was empty. It's empty. It's empty. It's empty. And a young girl up front noticed this colored rope around his waist. She said, "What is that colored rope for?" And he untucked the end and he handed it to her. And she pulled on it as hard as she could. That's what every kid should do, ought to do, and can do. And he started to spin. And the rope came off his body, tied itself to a tree, danced over their heads, tied itself to the only other tree in town, and it was exactly long enough. And everybody in town who measured said, "Nice." The peddler said, "Come on forward. My shop is open." Everybody looked at each other. He said, "Do you have a little trouble? Do you have something in your head going, nya, 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 nya? Is there something bothering you? Do you have a trouble, a misery, a broken heart, anything broken? Do you have something? Just come forward and put it in the basket." Everybody took a step back and they said, "I am not going up there." But there was a boy, and he had a flat tire. His father had been promising to fix it. He dragged the flat tire for his bike, and he pushed it in the basket, and he said, I have a flat tire." The tailor had wild red hair. He'd been hiding under his hat for his life, and he came forward, and he took off his hat, and he said, I really hate my red hair, and he dropped his hat. The teacher came forward, dropped in her watch. She says, "There's no such thing as time anymore." The man who loved to run, his legs very crippled, he just put a leg in. Everybody had something. The lady who loved to sew, her fingers stiff, dropped in her fingers. One woman, she had a locket and had no picture inside it, and she went up and she was hard taking it off, but she took it off and she dropped it in the basket. Everybody had something. A widow had 2 daughters, no food, nothing to eat. She put her coin purse in. Everybody had something. And when they were done and had stepped back, the peddler snapped his fingers and the basket flew up in the air and it rolled along the rope and it hung everything out on the line. And then he said, "Come on forward. Take from the line the smallest trouble that you see. From me to you today, it's free." Hard to resist. People stepped forward and started looking, really looking. And as though they were in a museum. And they eventually started reaching up and taking something and really looking at it. And everybody found something. And then they were looking at the peddler, and he smiled. Everyone had taken back. He said, just take from the line the smallest trouble that you see. And they all had taken back what they had put in. And there was a group. You could do that if you like. They started turning to each other. A woman came up to the widow, said, come for supper, bring your daughters. The tailor was shoving his hair back up under his hat, and the woman putting the locket around her neck, she said, don't hide your hair. Everybody was turning and talking to each other. The peddler snapped his fingers and the rope untied itself and rolled around his waist. And then he snapped his fingers and the basket jumped up on his shoulder. That's when the boys noticed him, and he started walking out of town, and they ran after him, and they called him and they said, hey, mister, take your hat off again. And he turned and he took his hat off. He made a bow, he put it back on, and his hair found its way through the same holes. And the kids said, yeah, stay for supper. And the peddler waved and he left. And you know, for years, the story was told of the peddler. There were days when they were working, and sure as could be, they thought they heard that tiny sound. And they would stop their work and look up, and the child would say, Dad, what? And the story would unfold. They did not live happily ever after. They lived happier than ever before. And there's an old sentence that ended up in the back of one of Garrison Keillor's first book, and it goes like this. Some luck lies in not getting what you thought you wanted, but getting what you have, which once you have it, you may be smart enough to think it's what you would have wanted had you known. What? Some luck lies in not getting what you thought you wanted, but getting what you have, which once you have it, you may be smart enough to see is what you would have wanted had you known. Our next storyteller is Nick Smith. He's been telling with Inland Valley Tellers for 20 years. 20 years this year. He's a librarian. Shh, don't tell anyone. But he has been a wonderful advocate for us and really helped us move forward. And he also has been involved in producing musical folk music series in the Pasadena area and the San Gabriel Storytellers. I never know what he's going to bring to us, and I always look forward to it. Please welcome Nick Smith.
Well, this story comes out of the fact that as a kid, my musical tastes were just a little bit eclectic. My personal record collection had a recording of the Grand Canyon Suite, an Elvis Presley record, a Beach Boys record, an Alan Sherman record, and a Kingston Trio record. So I listened to my parents' records, of course, because they had other stuff. There was one particular musician that I found fascinating. He was a jazz musician, Oscar Brown Jr., and he had the talent of turning stories into songs in ways that you would never expect. One of his songs was about the cries of a street peddler in the streets of an old city. But this one caught my attention so much that I tried to find the story that it was based on. And I couldn't. I eventually found a collection of folk tales, and it had a poem version of this story that didn't seem to have a source. Only recently I found that the host of a PBS program was asked if he could track it down because his program is about tracking down cultures and identity through genetics. And he basically said, well, I sort of can figure out where it came from, maybe. Now I knew that my quest was not in vain. I had to put this back into the form of a story, and I did so some time ago, and I present it to you now. You see, in the old days, the animals admired each other for what they were best known for. Lion was admired for his bravery and ferocity. Elephant was admired for his strength and wisdom. And Monkey, well, nobody really admired Monkey. The fact was that all that Monkey was known for, all that he was good at, was being a nuisance. He would play tricks on everyone. Not his friends, because he didn't really have any friends, but he would play tricks on everyone, and that was really all anyone remembered about him. So it was that he decided, well, if that's all I'm good for, I'd better be the best at it. And how can I do that? How can I play the best trick in the world? How about if I play a trick on lion and elephant at the same time? And so he went to Lion. Now, in those days, Lion was recognized as the king of the jungle, of course, and Monkey went up to him and bowed very low and said, "Oh, Lion, so much admired and king of almost all the jungle." Now, Lion was relaxing up until that moment and heard the phrasing and said, "Almost? What do you mean, almost?" And Monkey said, "Well, you know, there are always those out there who don't believe in the traditions, and some think that, you know, maybe because Elephant is strong and wise, that there's a chance that he might be a different kind of ruler than you. And, you know, these things happen, but I still believe in you." And Lion said, "Are you saying that Elephant wants to take my place as king of the jungle?" "Oh, no, I didn't say that at all. It's just that, you know, some people are saying that they might, you know, consider him as an alternative selection." Lion was not in a good mood. And he went off, stalking through the jungle, looking for Elephant, growling softly to himself along the way to keep himself in a bad mood, because, you know, these things do wear off after a while. But by the time he got to where Elephant was having a snack. His snack consisted of bending over a banana tree and getting the bananas down to where he could conveniently pull a stalk of bananas off the tree and then letting the tree spring back up. And that was what he was doing when Lion walked into the clearing. And as he saw Elephant so easily able to bend a banana tree down to do this, he began to consider, he's strong. And I don't really have any really good reason to be upset with him. It's just Monkey told me a rumor and, well, maybe I'd better not really do anything till I learn more. And so he started a very polite conversation with Elephant, who was munching away on the bananas and was puzzled that the way Lion had come up and sort of stopped abruptly. But they had a polite conversation, and then Lion went off on his day. Monkey, of course, had been watching and waiting to see what would happen. And that was when the second step of his plan began. For the next day, he went up to Lion and said, "Oh, Lion, master of much of the jungle." Now, Lion noticed the change in the phrasing almost immediately. "What do you mean, much of the jungle?" Well, you see, Elephant may have mentioned that you sort of walked up to him and backed away rather quickly when you saw how strong he was. And there's some who take this as being a possible taint on your bravery because, it obviously was just your own exercising of wisdom to not want to get into a fight with Papa Elephant, who is so big and strong after all. Lion said, "I am not afraid of Elephant," and stalked off into the jungle, looking to see where Elephant might be to try and find him and resolve this. Well, again, he found a mealtime of Elephant, and this time he was in the mood for some coconut. The flesh of the coconut and the milk of it, but not every animal is really capable of devouring the coconut in the way Elephant does. Because you see, when he sees a coconut tree with the nice, ready coconuts, he taps on it with one foot and coconuts fall to the ground, and he cracks one open by pressure from one foot, and then eats and drinks from the coconut. And that is exactly what he was doing when Lion approached the clearing. And once again, Lion was reasonably impressed by this display of strength because he knew that he could not, in fact, do that same thing. And again, he had a polite conversation with Lion, but went away without really involving teeth and claws and that sort of a thing. And once again, Monkey was watching. And once again, Monkey prepared. And on the third day, Monkey went to Lion and said, "Oh, Lion, once recognized as king of the jungle." "Once," said Lion. "Well, Elephant made it clear that you had sort of backed down from any sort of confrontation with him, and that, it's some people are saying that he might be a better king of the jungle, and I still believe in you." And Lion this time was so angry. Now, the difference between a normal angry feline and one that has gone over to the hunt is that one that is simply looking for attention or trying to frighten makes sounds, the roar or the snarl, but a feline that is hunting is silent. And this time, as Elephant was down by the river, splashing water on himself, he did not hear Lion approach. And so Lion took him by surprise when he sprang from the brush and with his claws scratched Elephant. There was a brief moment when Lion thought to himself, perhaps that was not the best thing to do. It was the moment when he found himself in the grasp of Elephant's trunk and tossed high up into one of the trees as Elephant walked over and splashed mud on the scratches on his side and stomped off into the jungle. I don't know if you've ever considered something. Lions don't normally climb trees, and therefore they're not necessarily prepared to climb down a tree after having been thrown there. By the time Lion got back to the ground, he was bedraggled with leaves and twigs in his mane, limping slightly because coming down from the tree had not gone well, and in fact was more than a bit upset. And that was when he heard the laughing from a different tree. I got you, I got you, I got you. I tricked both you and Elephant. Oh, that was so much fun. Oh, that was so great. Oh, I'll tell everyone what happened and how I was responsible for this. Oh, this will be so great. If you've ever been gleeful and enjoying yourself and doing something along those lines, it is perhaps best not to do it on the branch of a tree. Because Monkey, while jumping up and down on said branch of said tree, slipped and fell to the ground. And before he could get up and run away, Lion landed on him with a great paw and said, "Tell me why I should not rend you limb from limb and devour the juicy bits." And Monkey said, oh, I know. It's because I have something very, very, very important to tell you about. Because there's it's so immensely important. You'll want to know this. If you can lift your paw up off of me, I can tell you something very, very important. Well, knowing that he still had claws and a great deal of reach, Lion lifted his paw up off of Monkey, and Monkey lifted up one paw and lifted it and pointed behind Lion over his shoulder and said, "Elephant!" And Lion turned to look, and Monkey was up another tree. And so it was that Lion looked up and said, "You're safe now. Nothing could induce me to climb that tree to go after you. But if you come down, then you're mine." And so it is that to this day, lions live on the ground and do not climb trees. And monkeys, to the best of their ability, stay up in the trees uneaten by lions. And that is the tale of Monkey's Trick. And I have to tell you that if you ever watch that PBS show by Henry Louis Gates about cultures, he was the one who said, "I think I know which culture was the origin of that, but neither he nor I have found the intermediate steps to how it got from that to the street poem in Chicago that was the basis for the stories and the songs that I heard as a kid." So John's hiding back there. So our next teller. Oh, you gonna? Oh, then you can go ahead. You've got the notes.
Adrienne Lowry's been with us for 12 years telling. And the moment that sparked for her was she was studying and working with her PhD at USC, and she was asked to work with a freshman writing class. And things changed. Please welcome Adrienne Lowry. She loves
Good story.
strong women, social justice,
That's why a lot of us become teachers. Captive audience. Well, I'm of the belief that there are a lot of really great stories for the holiday seasons, and they kind of get told a little late into the season, sometimes at the end of the season. And so there is a story that I think warrants being told before Advent begins in the next week or so, and before the holiday season emerges in full bloom, much like the craft stores that tell us in August that it's time to work on our Christmas stuff. But this story, I feel like we need it right now. So this is a story called The Secret of the Gifts, and it's by Paul Fluke. Now, we all know, probably from osmosis during the Christmas season, the Christmas story. We know about, the star in the east and the three kings who came and followed it and got to the Christ child. We know these parts of the stories. And we kind of know the external parts of these stories. We know that the wise men came over hills and valleys on their stately camels and arrived at the stable. We know that they had gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, sure. And then we know that they went on their way. But whatever became of those gifts? We don't necessarily know, but if you listen very carefully, you too shall learn the secret of the gifts. There were the three wise men who did come from the east, following the star, riding their camels, weary of the long trip, and they arrived at the stable, each bearing their gift. Well, one by one, there was a little crowd outside the stable, kind of watching these great dignitaries coming. And one by one, they came to the stable door. Well, the first, of course, was Gaspar. He was resplendent in his furs and velvets and glittering brooches at his neck and at his waist. And he carried in front of him a small but very heavy little box of gold. And as he got to the door of the stable, there was the angel Gabriel, who said, "And why have you come?" "I bring a gift for the newborn king," said Gaspar. "Your gift," said the angel, "must be something precious to your soul." "It is," said Gaspar. "I bring the finest and purest gold." "We shall see," said the angel, as he opened the door and ushered him into the stable. As he walked in, the hush, you could hear the animals in the background rustling a bit, and the mother and the father sitting very quietly next to the manger where the tiny child lay, eyes glittering with the lamplight. And he felt this sense of awe in being in the presence of this, whatever this was, this holiness. And he went to kneel and lay his gold at the foot. And he starts up, and in his hands was a hammer. Its handle was long and sinewy, about the length of a man's arm, and its head was scarred and blackened. And "What is this?" he asked. "That," said Angel Gabriel, "is the essence of yourself." "What are you talking about?" he asked. "This is a hammer. I brought gold." "Yes," he said, "and you have used your gold to beat your enemies into submission, to cheat your friends, to build hovels for the poor while you lived in magnificence. Your gold has become the corruption of your soul." Gaspar knew the angel spoke the truth. And so he turned to leave, and the angel said, No. You must leave your gift. I can't leave this. It's so rough and heavy. The child will hurt himself. He might bruise his hands or his feet with this thing. That is a worry you must leave to heaven, said Gabriel. You must leave your gift if you would be free. And so Gaspar took the hammer, laid it at the feet of the Christ child's manger. And as he stood up, he felt the lightness of angels' wings on his fingertips. And as he left the stable, everyone could see that there's a glow, a lightness about him as he smiled at those who waited outside. And so we know the story has been told. Well, next was Melchior. Ah, the learned Melchior. He was not as resplendent as Gaspar, for he wore the darker robes of a scholar. And the length of his beard and the lines in his face bespoke of somebody who had lived long searching for elusive truth. And as he approached the stable door, we know that he encountered Gabriel. And the angel said to him, "What have you brought?" "I bring frankincense," he said, in a beautiful, beautiful silver flask. It is the essence of days gone by. Well, it must be something that is precious to your soul. It must be the essence of yourself. "It is," said Melchior. "Well, and so we shall see," said the angel. And he too opened the door and ushered Melchior in. One who had lived his life searching for truth never felt such a presence as this small child in those dark, glittering eyes in the lamplight. And as he knelt in the straw to put the flask of precious ointment at the foot, he started up and he looked, and in his hand was this rough clay jar with a stopper in it. And he pulled the stopper and he sniffed. "What foul magic is this?" he asked the angel. "And what is it?" said Gabriel. "This is vinegar," he spat like a curse. "Well, and so it is," said the angel. "You have brought the essence of your soul. You have harbored resentments and anger until they have smoldered like embers burning deep within you. You have poisoned your soul in these passions for anger and competition." Melchior knew the angel spoke the truth. And he fumbled to put the flask in the folds of his robe and to sidle out, and the angel stopped him. "No, you must leave your gift." "I can't leave this here. Not at the feet of such love and innocence. This is vile stuff. He might touch us to his lips. This is not for him." "It is only for him," said the angel. "And you must leave your gift if you would be clean." So he too knelt in the straw and left the rude clay flask at the foot of the Christ child's manger. And as he left, others said, "He looks like the face of a young man before he went in, all lined, and now his smiles wreathed his face, and he greeted people as if they were people he'd long wished to see and had missed for a very, very long time, and upon the horizons yet to find." Well, you know there's one more. And that third one to visit is Gaspar. Oh, Gaspar. Sorry, Balthazar. My apologies. Balthazar. Well, he strode as one tall as a tree, his shoulders as wide as an oaken beam. He was a general of armies, a scourge of walled cities. He was born to lead. And he too carried a small brass-bound box with him. And as he approached the door, we know the question that the angel put to him. "Have you a gift?" "I do," he said, and those around him didn't really hear what he was saying to the angel. They said, look. They couldn't even see Gabriel. Only Balthazar could. He does obeisance before the king, even the great Balthazar. But we know the conversation they had. Have you a gift? Said the angel. I do. I have myrrh, some of the finest booty of my boldest conquests, won through strength and warfare. Is it, asked the angel, the essence of yourself? It is, said Balthazar. So it is, said the angel, and we shall see. He opened the door, and Allah ushered him in. Well, the great Balthazar felt the presence of the room again, the holiness in the air, the child's piercing eyes as they glittered in the lamplight. And he knelt in the straw and was shuffling forward, holding the handle of his box. When he got closer, he stopped. And in his hand was not the box that he had brought. It was his own spear, the lamplight glittering on its steely tip, the sweat of his palm on its shaft. What is this? What foul magic has occurred here? He starts up, and the angel said, none but the magic of your own warfare. You have conquered army after army, enemy after enemy, yet one more bolder than the last one, until you have turned your soul into a spear. I'll teach you not to jest at a time like this. And he raised his arm, and the angel did not flinch. He went on. Living only to conquer, you have been conquered. Do you think that I like to fight, asked Balthazar? My people are depending on me. Right now, our enemies are amassing on the borders, and we must raise more men and more weapons. And the angel said, more? Then what? Why, more than we have now. What more than they have? And will they not, interrupted the angel, also need more? The words did battle with hundreds of years of warrior instinct in his lineage. Balthazar said, I have to have my spear. I have to leave here and protect my people. The angel said, your way is a certainty of spears. You can take the risk. A long pause, and Balthazar released the handle of his spear as the angel released his long-held breath. He said, but is it safe here? This child, his flesh is tender. If he could hurt himself, he could pierce his flesh. That is a worry that heaven will take upon itself, said the angel. That is not for you to worry. You have left your gift. Go and be renewed. And he too left the stable, one who seemed lighter and taller. And as he embraced one person after another, like long-lost brothers and sisters he had not seen for a very long time. Well, now, that's as much as the story that we know. And you've listened very well, and now you know the secret of the gifts. Only there, at the foot of love and innocence, can we leave those long-held sorrows and hurts and resentments and the things that are the secrets of our hearts in order to find ourselves clean, in order to forgive others and let them forgive us. And you ask, what of the gifts? The hammer and the vinegar and the spear. Well, there's another story about them several years later on a hill outside of Jerusalem. But that's a worry for heaven to take upon itself, as only heaven can.
chance to talk to John St. Clair the other day, and when we got off the phone, before we got off the phone, I said, I'm really glad you're not on a mountain today. He's a leader for Sierra Club, leads hikes. I have a fantasy that maybe you could take us on a really slow hike sometime. I'd go, especially if there's sandwiches like an hour in. But he's our man, and he's our driver and our webmaster, and stays in touch with us. And a little known fact is that every year the Storytelling Association of California selects a regional gem, and we alternate between Northern and Southern California. And John St. Clair is the regional gem for 2025. So we'll celebrate that at the Southern California Swapping Festival. It means he has an hour to tell stories if he wants to, or he can have a panel. He gets to design it, but we'll all be there. So please welcome John St. Clair.
I'm going to tell you a folk tale from Russia called A Portrait for the Tsar. Long ago in the city of St. Petersburg, Russia, there lived a master painter. He had been painting for many, many years, and over the years he developed a reputation as one of the greatest painters in all of Russia. But as he got older, he decided he wanted to have an apprentice for two reasons, really. One, he wanted someone young and strong that could lift and carry heavy things in the art studio. But he also wanted someone that had a unique artistic approach to life, someone that was eager to learn, because this master painter had developed some very unique techniques of painting, and he wanted to pass that on and not have it die with him. And so it was that young Mikhail, 16 years old, was chosen to be the master painter's apprentice. And Mikhail was happy to lift and carry heavy things, and he did have an innate artistic talent, and he was eager to learn. And after several years, Mikhail was selling his own paintings that he produced. Now, also at this time in St. Petersburg, Russia, there lived the Tsar of Russia in his palace. And this was the meanest, most evil Tsar in the history of Russia. He was so mean. He would bring people before him and give them near impossible tasks. And then when they did not succeed, he would have their head chopped off. Well, one day at the art studio where Mikhail lived with the master, they lived in the apartment above the art studio, there was a knock at the door. And Mikhail went to answer the door, and there was a messenger from the Tsar. And he read, "The Tsar of Russia requests the presence of the master painter who lives at this place tomorrow at noon." And then he handed the paper to Mikhail. And Mikhail was excited. He thought, the Tsar's going to commission him to do a portrait of the Tsar. That's fantastic. And so he was all excited when he handed his master and mentor the paper. And when the master painter read this summons, he was not happy, because he had heard what happens in the palace of the Tsar, and he wanted no part of it, but he had to go. And Mikhail noticed that he did not look happy at all, and Mikhail said, "Let me go with you, I'll give you moral support." "Oh, no," said the master painter. "You are much too young and impulsive. You might say something to get both of our heads chopped off. No, you stay here, I'll go by myself." And so the next morning, the master painter left his art studio and walked towards the center of St. Petersburg where the palace was, and he presented the summons to the guard, and the guard looked at it and said, wait here, I'll come get you when he's ready. Well, he waited there a long time. It was well into the afternoon, past the stated noon time for his presence. And the guard came and got him. He said, follow me. And they went to the Tsar's chambers. And it was a long, narrow room with guards standing on both sides. And at the end of the room was this very ornate throne, and the Tsar was sitting on the throne. And the master painter was led up to within about 10 feet, and then the guards stood back. And the painter knelt to his knees and said, Your Majesty, I am honored that you have summoned me to come before you. How may I serve you? And the Tsar said, I have heard some people say that you are the greatest painter in all of Russia. Is that true? Well, said the humble painter, it is true I have been painting for many, many years. However, I have no idea who is the greatest painter in Russia because I am a painter, not a painting critic. Good answer, said the Tsar. Good answer. I think I would like to find out how good you are at painting. I'm going to commission you to do a painting. You choose the subject, but I want this to be the greatest painting you have ever done. And I want this painting to be so awesome that when I look at it, it will take my breath away. Can you do that? Yes, said the master painter. I think I could do that. I will give it my best effort. Well, you had better, said the Tsar, because if you fail to take my breath away, if you fail to please me with your painting, I will have your head chopped off. Now, you have 6 weeks to do this painting. You can do it sooner and bring it to me whenever it's done, but it must be done by 6 weeks. Do you have any other questions? And the master painter said, No, Your Majesty, thank you for the honor of doing this. And he turned and he left. Well, on the way back to the art studio, he was fretting. How in the world was he going to do a painting that would please this Tsar and take his breath away? So when he got back to the studio, he told Mikhail what his task was. And Mikhail, forever the optimist, said, Oh, that's easy. You are a wonderful painter of birds of prey. What you should do is paint a beautiful sky, and then on top of that, paint a raptor in full flight coming right off of the canvas. That'll take his breath away. You know what? That's a good idea. I think I will do that. Let's get everything ready, set up the easel, get the paints, and I'll start first thing in the morning. And so he did. And he worked all day long. He painted a beautiful sky, and then he painted a hawk in full flight with its wings spread out and its mouth open. And when he finished, at the end of the day, he was pleased with his work. And Mikhail said, Oh, that's going to take his breath away. So the next morning, they got up, and Mikhail said, Let me carry it for you. And so the master painter said, Okay, let's cover it, and you carry it, but you must promise not to say anything to the Tsar. I don't want you to spoil it. I promise, said Mikhail. And so they walked to the palace, told the guard that they had this painting to give to the Tsar, and requested that an easel be put up in the Tsar's chamber so that they could mount the picture on the easel for viewing. They waited all day long. And finally, they were let in, and they went to the Tsar's chambers and walked in, and Mikhail saw the easel, and he put the painting on, still covered, and stood by it. And the master painter knelt in front of the Tsar and said, Your Majesty, I have painted the best painting of my life. I hope it pleases you. And the Tsar said, I'll bet you do. And then he said, Please unveil the painting. And so Mikhail took the cover off the painting. And the Tsar went, He did gasp. It did take his breath away. And Mikhail smiled, and the master painter smiled, because they knew they had succeeded in the task of taking the Tsar's breath away. But then their smiles faded because the Tsar began to frown. And he said, "This painting bores me. Guards, take the painter to the dungeons. He will have his head chopped off tomorrow morning." "No!" said Mikhail. "You can't do that. You promised that you would pay him handsomely if he took your breath away, and we all saw it took your breath away to view that painting." Well, the Tsar at first was stunned at this outburst, and they said, "Who is this young, rude, insolent young man who dares tell me, the Tsar, what I can and cannot do?" And then the master painter said, "Your Majesty, please forgive him. That's Mikhail, my apprentice, and he is young and he doesn't think before he speaks. Please forgive him." "Oh," said the Tsar, "so he is your apprentice, is he? Well, I wonder how good at painting he is. I wonder if you have taught him to paint better than you have taught him manners. Young Mikhail, you've had a little bit of time to think now. Do you have anything else to say to me?" And Mikhail said, he was just seething with anger, and he said, You are the most evil man I have ever seen before. You must be the son of the devil." "Oh," said the Tsar, "I see that stopping to think does not help your manners at all. Well, young apprentice, I have a task for you. I want you to do a portrait of my father, as you see him. And if your painting pleases me, I will release your friend and mentor, and you both can go home. But if my painting does not please me, then I will chop both of your heads off. You have 6 weeks to complete this painting, but I suggest you do it sooner than that because I'm not sure this old man can survive in my dungeon." So Mikhail was still seething with anger, and the Tsar said, "Take this guy out of here." And so the guards escorted him out, and Mikhail was walking home, and he was still seething with anger, and he thought, how in the world can I please this Tsar? That was the most beautiful painting I have ever seen, and he rejected it. How can I do this? And then he thought, wait, the Tsar is an evil man. He can't appreciate beauty. Maybe if I can do an evil-looking painting, he will appreciate it. But how can I do that? I've never painted anything evil-looking before. I need a subject. I know. I'll go down to the wharf because some pretty shady characters live down there, and I need to find someone with an evil-looking face I can use as a subject. So Mikhail went down to the wharf, and he looked, and he saw this man approach him. He had a scar on his face, and he had a scowl on his face. But as he got closer, he saw that there was just in the corner of his eye, a little twinkle of humanity and kindness, and it ruined the whole effect. So then he walked on, and then he saw a man. Oh, those eyes, they looked so evil. And he appeared to have a scowl too, but at the corner of the mouth, there was just a little bit of a turn up of a smile, and it ruined the whole effect. So he gave up, he went home, back to the art studio, and he could not sleep. He didn't know what to do. He racked his brain. He just didn't know what to do. Well, as the sun came up, there was a knock at the door. And he went to the answer the door. And there, standing, was a tall, handsome, kind of handsome-looking, well-dressed man. And the man said, "I heard that you need a subject for a painting, and I have come to offer myself." The man's laugh kind of sent chills down Mikhail's spine. And he said, "Well, yes, I guess so." And when he looked at this man's face, there was something about it that was really disturbing. I mean, he was handsome, but ooh, those eyes. And there was something evil about this man. And so he invited him in and had him sit down. and he started painting, and he really thought he kind of got the essence of the evil in this man's face, and at the end of the day, he was pretty much finished, and the man finally spoke and said, "Can I see what you've done?" And Mikhail said, "Sure." So the man got up and walked around and said, "Ooh, nice job, nice job. However, you didn't quite get the eyes right." And he took a paintbrush and he did a little touch up on the eyes, and indeed he made them look more evil. And Mikhail said, "Oh, I didn't know you were an artist." No one's ever called me an artist before, although I am kind of artistic in dealing with human souls. And a chill went down Mikhail's spine. And then the man said, "I have a deal for you. I know what your task is. I know that your friend and mentor is in the dungeon at the Tsar's palace. And I know you've been commissioned to do a painting. Let me take this painting home, and I will fix it up so it will bring about the desired effect, and your friend and mentor will be free to go. But it does involve the price of a human soul. Are you willing to agree to this?" Mikhail was kind of shaking, but he didn't know what to do. He thought he had an impossible task, and at this point he felt he was dealing with the devil, and should he trust the devil to actually free his friend, and would that mean he would lose his soul? He would do anything to help his friend and mentor, so he said, "Yes, I agree, you can take the painting." So the man left, and Mikhail finally was able to sleep, but before he went to sleep, he dropped to his knees and he asked forgiveness from God for making a deal with the devil, and then he sort of passed out and slept all night long. Well, he was awakened by a knock at the door, and there was the man, and he was holding a painting, and it wasn't just the painting, it had a frame, and it was covered. He couldn't see the painting, but he could see the bottom of the frame that was sticking out at the bottom, and it was the most beautiful, ornate gold he had ever seen. And so the man said, "I see you noticed the gold frame. Pretty good, huh?" And Mikhail said, "Yes." And the man said, "Well, you know, where I live, I told this goldsmith who's really, really good at dealing with gold, I told him if he would make this frame for me, I would give him 60 seconds of a cool breeze." And he jumped at the chance of doing that. And then he said, "Listen carefully, Mikhail. If this is going to work, you have to follow my directions to the letter. So what you're going to do, first of all, do not uncover this painting. Do not look at this painting. What you're going to do is you're going to take it to the palace. You're going to tell the guard that you've brought the painting that the Tsar commissioned you to paint, and tell him to have an easel to display it, and tell him to bring your friend and mentor, the master painter, up from the dungeon to be in the Tsar's chambers to see the unveiling of this painting. The Tsar will agree to that because he will think it funny for the master painter to watch you fail, and so he'll do that. And then what you're going to do when you get there is you're going to put the painting on the easel, and then you're going to turn and you're going to walk over to your friend, take his hand, and start walking away. Now the Tsar is going to yell at you and say, "Stop, what are you doing?" And then you're going to turn and you're going to tell the Tsar, "Your Majesty, I have painted the painting that you requested. It was the greatest painting I've ever done. It is so good that only you are worthy of unveiling it." And then you're going to turn and continue walking, and the Tsar is going to sputter and stammer and tell you to stop, and they said, "Oh, well," and he'll jump off the throne and he'll unveil it, and you're to tell your friend and mentor not to turn around and look, that you both need to just walk out of that room and Don't react to what's going to happen. And if you follow my directions exactly, you'll both be safe. Do you think you can do that? Yes, yes, said Mikael. So the man left. Mikael took the painting. When he got to the guard, he gave the guard the instructions to put up the easel and have his friend brought up to view the unveiling. It was the end of the day. It was starting to get dark when the guard came and got them. And he followed the directions exactly. He put the painting on the easel. He walked over to his friend, took his hand, and they started walking. The Tsar said, "Stop, stop, what are you doing? Unveil the painting." And then he turned around and he said, "Your Majesty, only you are worthy of unveiling this painting. It must be seen with your eyes first." And then he turned and started walking, and the Tsar was mad, but he jumped off the throne. He walked over, he pulled the cover off, and he let out the most blood-curdling scream anyone has ever heard. Mikael and the master painter continued to walk out of the room. The guards were frozen. A couple of the Tsar's closest advisors, who were evil themselves, came out to see what was the matter. When they looked at the painting, they both dropped dead. Mikael then explained the whole thing to his friend and mentor, how he had made a deal with the devil to save him. And they walked back, and as they walked back, that screaming was so loud, it went out of the palace into the city, and it continued all night long. Now, when Mikael and the master painter got back to the art studio, they both dropped to their knees and asked forgiveness from God for Mikael's making a deal with the devil, and thank God for having the painter released from the dungeon. And then they went to bed. Well, the screaming continued all night until the sun came up. And as the first rays of the sun came up, the screaming stopped. The soldiers that were in there became unfrozen, and the Tsar was dead. And the general of the army, who never really liked the Tsar anyway, sent for the Tsar's brother in Siberia to come to St. Petersburg to take over the rule of Russia. And the people in the city rejoiced because nobody liked that Tsar. When the news spread that he had died, they were all happy. Well, there was a knock at the door of the art studio, and Mikael and the master painter went to answer, and there was the man. And in one hand, he had the rolled up painting. In the other hand, he had the golden frame. He had taken the painting out of the frame. And he said, I think I would like to give this frame to you because it's much too beautiful. It doesn't really go with the rest of the decor where I live. Would you like to have it? And they said, sure. And then he said, would you like to see the painting? It's safe to look at it now. And they said, yes. And so he unfurled it. And the painting was the Tsar sitting on his throne with flames coming up. And you could tell that the Tsar was screaming. His mouth was open, his face was contorted. And then he rolled it back up and he said, I keep this. And then Mikael said, so do I have to fulfill my part of the bargain and go with you now? Silly apprentice. You have a kind and gentle soul. You do not belong where I live. I got what I wanted. I wanted the soul of the Tsar. And so he left, and Mikael and the master painter both dropped to their knees and thanked God for their good fortune. A portrait for the Tsar. Wow.